The sun hung low over Mercy Ridge Farm, painting the sky in shades of burnt orange and crimson. Jack Sullivan stood at the edge of his property, surveying the land that had been in his family for 4 generations. The barn, a magnificent red structure with white trim, needed the new machinery delivered today. The veterinary equipment for his cattle operation had been ordered 3 months ago. 3 months of scheduling, planning, coordinating. Everything had to go in the barn by sunset. Jack was 52, weathered by decades of early mornings and impossible work. His hands were calloused, his back permanently curved from years of labor, his face mapped with sun damage and exhaustion. But his eyes remained sharp, intelligent, tinged with a sadness that lingered since his wife died 6 years ago. His daughter, Maya, lived in the city now, Boston, far from the farm, and he rarely saw her. The farm was his life. It was all he had left. The delivery truck was scheduled for 2 p.m. It was now 1:47. Jack checked his phone again, though he knew the time. 13 minutes to spare. He'd widened the gate entrance last week, measured everything twice. The equipment, a 5,000-pound irrigation system and a state-of-the-art veterinary suite in a specialized transport container, would fit through with inches to spare. This delivery would transform his operation, allow him to expand, maybe even hire help for the first time in a decade. The sun reflected off something on the county road that bordered his property. A car, an expensive car. As it approached his gate, Jack recognized the vehicle immediately. A black Bentley, the kind he'd only seen in magazines at the dentist's office. The kind that cost more than his entire farm. It slowed, then it stopped, directly in front of his gate. Jack's stomach tightened. He had no reserved parking here. The county road was public, but there was an unspoken understanding in rural communities. You didn't park on someone's property line, especially not when you could see they were expecting something. A woman emerged from the driver's side. She was in her mid-40s, impeccably dressed in designer athleisure that probably cost more than Jack's monthly mortgage. Blonde hair blown out, cascaded past her shoulders. Her sunglasses were the size of dinner plates. Diamond earrings caught the light. Every inch of her screamed wealth, entitlement, and a life lived without consequences. "Excuse me," she called out, not bothering to walk toward him. "I need to park here for a few hours. I'm having some work done at the house up the road, and the contractor's truck is blocking my driveway. I'm Corinne Westbrook, by the way. I just bought the Morrison property." Jack felt something shift in his chest. The Morrison property. That was the sprawling estate at the top of the hill, 15 acres of manicured lawns, a mansion that looked like it had been transplanted from another country. Someone had bought it last month. He'd heard about it in town. A woman from the city. A divorcee with a settlement, people said, richer than God. "I appreciate it," Corinne continued, already walking back to her car without waiting for his response. "But I really need this spot, just for the afternoon." "Actually," Jack started, but she was already sliding back into the driver's seat. He walked toward her, his jaw tightening. "Ma'am, I'm expecting a delivery, a large delivery, that requires this access." Corinne lowered her window. She didn't remove her sunglasses. "And you are?" "Jack Sullivan, this is my property, and my gate access." "The road is public," Corinne said, examining her manicure with visible disinterest. "I can park on public road." "You're directly blocking my entrance." "Not blocking, parked, it's different." She raised the window. Jack stood there, his shadow stretching across the hood of the Bentley. He could feel the anger building, not the hot, explosive kind, but something colder, more dangerous. The kind that had nowhere to go but inward. He walked back to the house and called the delivery company. The dispatcher's voice was apologetic but firm. The truck was 30 minutes out. Jack explained the situation. The dispatcher said they'd call when they arrived. Maybe the woman would move by then. Jack sat on his porch and waited. The Bentley didn't move. Corinne had reclined the seat and appeared to be napping. The delivery truck arrived at 2:31 p.m. Its massive cab pulled up to the gate, and the driver, a man named Robert in his 60s, climbed out and assessed the situation immediately. His expression darkened. "That car's gotta move," Robert said. Jack was already walking toward the Bentley. He knocked on the window, firmly. Corinne jolted awake, disoriented, and rolled down the window. "The truck is here," Jack said, keeping his voice level, reasonable. "I need you to move." "Well, I'm not ready to move yet," Corinne said, waving a hand dismissively. She was on her phone now, Jack noticed, texting. "Just have them come back in an hour." I scheduled this delivery 3 months ago. You parked here 5 minutes ago. That's your problem, not mine. I'm not going anywhere. She raised the window again. Jack stood motionless for a long moment. He could feel Robert watching from the truck, could feel the weight of wasted time, of careful planning becoming chaos through no fault of his own. He walked back to the truck. How long can you wait? Jack asked. Got another stop at 4, Robert said. After that, I got to reschedule everything, and I gotta be honest with you, Jack, rescheduling isn't free. There's fees involved. Jack's hands were shaking, not from anger anymore, from something else. Powerlessness. He'd spent his entire life working within the rules, respecting boundaries, doing things the right way. And it was falling apart because of a woman who could park a luxury vehicle and simply refuse to move. He went back and knocked again, harder this time. Karen opened the window, irritation now visible even behind the sunglasses. I've got a phone call scheduled with my lawyer in 10 minutes. I'm not moving this car. You want to move it yourself, be my guest. But I should tell you, I've got collision insurance that covers deliberate damage, and the lawsuit for vehicle damage would cost you more than this farm is worth. She said it pleasantly, like she was suggesting a restaurant. Jack turned away. He could feel his heartbeat in his throat. Think, he told himself, handle this right. He called the sheriff's office, waited on hold for 7 minutes. A deputy named Thompson, who Jack knew peripherally, came on the line. She's parked on county property? Thompson asked. Just barely, right at my property line. Is she obstructing your access completely? Jack looked at the Bentley. The road was technically wide enough for the truck to pass if the truck moved carefully, very carefully. It would be tight, maybe 6 inches on either side, but it might work. I think maybe we can make it, Jack said slowly. Then it's not technically obstructing. I could come tell her to move as a courtesy, but I don't have legal grounds to force it. She'd have to be blocking the public road, and you're saying she isn't. After Jack hung up, he walked back and explained the situation to Robert. The truck driver scratched his jaw. We could squeeze by, he said, but that Bentley. If she's claiming I caused any damage while I'm trying to navigate around her car, it's a liability nightmare. My company won't cover it. They'll fire me. Jack understood. He could see the math working behind Robert's eyes. No job was worth risking your career. Let me try one more time, Jack said. He knocked on the Bentley's window again. Karen didn't even look up from her phone. Jack waited. Then he knocked again and again. Finally, she cracked the window. What? The driver can't get past. The liability is too high. He'll lose his job if anything happens. For the first time, something that might have been genuine consideration crossed Karen's face. Well, I literally cannot move right now. I'm on a very important call. You're not, you're texting. Watch your tone, Karen said coldly. I'm not your wife. I'm not someone you can bully into compliance. Move your truck. Find another way. Call another company. I don't care. She raised the window. Jack felt something break inside him, not metaphorically. Actually crack like a frozen lake splitting under pressure. He went back to Robert. I'll pay the rescheduling fee, Jack heard himself say. All of it, my mistake for not anticipating this. Robert looked genuinely sorry. I know this ain't right, Jack. Jack just nodded. He felt numb now, empty. Robert drove the truck away, rumbling down the road, leaving Jack standing in the dust alone. The Bentley remained parked, gleaming in the afternoon sun. Karen was on the phone now, an actual call this time, laughing about something. Through the window, Jack could hear her. And the idiot farmer just moved his truck. Unbelievable. I told you I was getting harassed. Exactly. Obviously, I'm not moving. This is public property. Jack went into his house. He didn't look at the Bentley again. That night, alone in the farmhouse, Jack sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold. His hands were shaking again, adrenaline wearing off, pure rage taking its place. He couldn't afford the rescheduling fee. $2,000, that was nearly a month's profit. And the worst part? There was nothing he could do about it. She was right. She'd done nothing illegal, just cruel, just devastating to someone who couldn't fight back. The rescheduled delivery was for Thursday. Jack marked the calendar and circled it 3 times, as if the ritual would prevent another disaster. It didn't. Tuesday morning, Jack went into town for supplies and heard the news at Turner's Feed and Grain. Janet Turner, who owned the place with her husband, pulled him aside. You hear about the Westbrook woman? she asked, her voice low, conspiratorial. Jack had tried not to think about Karen Westbrook for the last 2 days. He'd failed, of course. She invaded his thoughts at random moments, when he was checking the cattle, when he was eating, when he was lying in bed at night staring at the ceiling. "What about her?" Jack asked. "She's had 3 contractors out to that mansion already, started renovation work before she even owned the place legally. The contractor she's using now, guy named Derek, works for Morrison Construction. He's apparently been out there every day. And he's not just working on the mansion." Janet leaned closer. "She's making complaints about the county road, wants it repaved, says the dust from farm vehicles is ruining her visibility." Jack felt his stomach drop. "The county road." "The road that goes past your property, that's what I heard." Janet's expression was sympathetic. "I'm sorry, Jack. I know you've had it rough since Margaret died. I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but I figured you'd hear about it anyway." Jack bought his supplies in silence and drove home in silence and sat in his truck for 30 minutes without moving. A complaint about the county road, about farm vehicles, that was code for a complaint about him. He was trying to process this when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. "Mr. Sullivan, this is Deputy Thompson. I'm calling regarding a complaint filed with the county regarding dust emissions from agricultural vehicles on County Road 7. Jack's hands went numb. Thompson continued. "The complainant alleges that heavy equipment usage on your property is creating hazardous visibility conditions on public roadway. The county is requiring an assessment. We'll need to come out and document everything." "When?" Jack asked hoarsely. "We can do Friday morning. Will you be available?" Friday morning, the day before the rescheduled delivery. When the county assessor and Deputy Thompson showed up Friday morning, Karen Westbrook was there too, standing on the county road in a pristine white linen outfit, directing their attention like she was staging a scene. "The visibility is actually dangerous," she was saying as Jack approached. "I nearly had an accident yesterday because of the dust cloud. I called my lawyer. He said I have grounds for a nuisance complaint. I want it documented." The assessor, a man named Hartley who looked like he had better things to do, was measuring the road width and making notes. "There's no excessive dust right now," Hartley observed. "Because he's not using equipment today," Karen said. "But when he does, especially with whatever industrial machinery he's planning to bring in, it creates a genuine hazard." Jack stepped forward. "I've had cattle on this land for 30 years. The dust has been here the entire time. No one's ever complained before." "That's because reasonable people live near the land," Karen said, turning to face him. She still had her sunglasses on, even though the morning was overcast. "Not everyone appreciates living next to an operational farm. It's dirty. It's loud. The smell is unbearable. I paid very good money for a quiet country retreat, and I'm not going to have it ruined by medieval farming practices." "Medieval," Jack started. "The county road is public," Karen continued, addressing the assessor. "I have every right to complain about hazardous conditions. He can either upgrade his equipment to reduce dust, or he can find somewhere else to operate." Hartley was writing notes. Deputy Thompson was looking uncomfortable. "The road's fine," Thompson said quietly. "I don't see a legitimate safety issue here." "Well, I do," Karen said. "And my attorney will be filing a formal environmental and safety complaint with the county board. You can check my files if you want documentation. I've been recording the dust clouds with timestamps." Jack realized she had actually prepared for this. She'd been documenting everything, waiting for the perfect moment to weaponize it. After the assessor and deputy left, Jack stood alone on his property. Karen was still there, leaning against her Bentley, which she'd parked on the road again, he noticed, sending an email on her phone. "You're going to destroy your own case," Jack said. "Filing environmental complaints out of spite, that's not going to hold up." Karen lowered her sunglasses just enough to look at him properly. Her eyes were cold, calculating. "I'm not filing out of spite. I'm filing because you tried to intimidate me with your truck and your property and your whole aggressive rural energy. I don't respond well to intimidation. I respond by winning." "I didn't try to intimidate you. I asked you to move your car. You let that massive truck sit at the edge of my vehicle. You tried to get me in legal trouble by calling the sheriff. You knocked on my window repeatedly. That's textbook harassment." She put her sunglasses back on. "And now you're here confronting me again, Honestly, I'm starting to feel unsafe. I might have to document this encounter too. Jack turned away before he did something he'd regret, but he could hear her laughing as he walked back toward his house. The rescheduled delivery on Thursday morning went smoothly. Robert backed the truck carefully through the gate, and Jack supervised as the equipment was unloaded into the barn. By 11 a.m., everything was inside, everything was safe, everything was where it needed to be. Except nothing felt safe anymore. That afternoon, Jack received an email from the county. The environmental complaint had been filed officially. An inspection was scheduled for the following week. The complaint cited excessive dust, noise pollution, animal waste runoff into the county road, and generally hazardous and unsanitary agricultural practices. The language was formal, official, devastating. Karen had hired a lawyer to draft it. Jack could tell by the precise phrasing, and the way it was worded made it sound like Jack was running some kind of biohazard facility instead of a family farm. He called his insurance company. His agent, a woman named Carol who'd known Jack for 20 years, tried to reassure him. "These complaints are common," she said. "Farmers and new property owners clash. It'll get sorted out." But it didn't sound like she believed her own words. Jack spent the next 3 days preparing for the inspection. He hired a team to clean the access road, to spray it down and reduce dust. He hired another team to do environmental testing on the soil. He documented everything meticulously, preparing a defense against accusations that hadn't technically been made yet. And every night he sat at his kitchen table and thought about the fact that he'd done nothing wrong. He was the one who'd been violated. His time had been stolen. His money had been wasted. And now his business was under investigation because a woman with too much money and too much anger had decided to destroy him. The county inspection happened on Tuesday. Hartley and a woman named Patricia Chen, an environmental specialist, spent 6 hours on his property. They tested soil, measured dust particles in the air, examined his waste management system, reviewed his veterinary records. At the end of the day, Hartley pulled Jack aside. "Your operation is well within compliance," he said. "Your waste management is actually better than most farms I inspect. There's minimal runoff. The dust levels are normal for a working farm. I don't see any environmental violations." Relief flooded through Jack. "So that's it. The complaint is dismissed." "The complaint is documented," Hartley said carefully. "But our findings show no violation. Your accuser can appeal the findings if she wants, but she'd need actual evidence. As it stands, you're clear." Jack nodded, trying to feel grateful, but something in Hartley's language troubled him. Accuser suggested guilt. Appeal suggested the fight wasn't over. He was right. 2 days later, Karen filed an appeal, and then she filed a new complaint, this time to the state level, claiming that Jack's farm was contributing to water table contamination. Then she filed a noise complaint with the county sheriff. Then she contacted the county zoning board about potential violations of agricultural development permits. Each complaint was technically different. Each one had to be investigated separately. Each one cost Jack money in legal fees and time and stress. And the worst part was that he understood her strategy. She'd learned something from the environmental complaint not sticking. Now she was filing multiple complaints, knowing that even if most of them didn't stick, some of them might. She was playing a numbers game, and she had unlimited resources to keep playing. Jack's lawyer, a man named Gerald who worked out of a small office in town, met with him in early November. "She's harassing you," Gerald said, reviewing the file. "This is clearly a pattern of intentional interference with your business operations, but proving intent in court is expensive and difficult. And honestly, Jack, you might win on the legal merits and still lose financially. Legal battles cost money." "How much are we talking?" "If this goes to trial, 30, 40,000, maybe more. And there's no guarantee you'd recover your costs even if you win. She probably has lawyers on retainer. This is like a paper cut to her. To you, it's a potential financial crisis." Jack felt something give inside him. The system was rigged. Not obviously, not in a way that would ever hold up in court, but fundamentally rigged in favor of people with money. People like Karen could just keep attacking, keep filing complaints, keep tying you up in legal knots until you either surrendered or ran out of resources. It was the perfect crime, Jack realized, perfectly legal harassment. "What would you advise?" Jack asked. Gerald hesitated. "Honestly, I'd advise you to try negotiating with her. Maybe offer to change some operational details, reduce dust, use quieter equipment, scale back your herd size. Show her that you're a good neighbor. Sometimes these disputes just need a pressure relief valve. Jack felt anger, pure and clear, rise in his chest. So I should surrender, change my entire operation because she wants to punish me for asking her to move her car. I'm advising practicality, not morality, Gerald said quietly. Morality doesn't pay legal bills. Winter came early that year. By mid-November, the temperatures had dropped to freezing at night, and Jack spent his mornings breaking ice on the cattle water troughs. The farm work was endless, and the complaints from Karen kept coming like snowfall. The difference was that snowfall eventually stopped. By late November, Karen had filed 6 separate complaints with different county agencies. 4 of them had been dismissed. 2 were still under investigation. Jack's legal bills had reached $18,000. His stress level had created a persistent tremor in his hands that made precision work difficult. He'd stopped sleeping. Most nights, he lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, calculating the math of his own destruction. If Karen kept up this pace, she could bankrupt him through legal fees alone in less than a year. And the worst part was that the law gave him no real recourse. Each complaint had to be investigated individually. Each investigation was theoretically separate. Even though it was obvious that Karen was orchestrating a coordinated campaign of harassment, the legal system treated each complaint as an isolated event. It was ingenious in a cruel way, perfectly legal harassment. Jack had always believed in the system. He'd always believed that if you did things right, if you followed the rules and treated people fairly, the world would treat you fairly in return. That belief was dying. With every new complaint, every new legal letter, every new email from the county, it died a little more. On the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, Jack received a letter from the county zoning board. Karen had filed a petition to review his agricultural permit. She was claiming that his farm constituted a commercial livestock operation that violated residential zoning standards. The letter stated that a hearing would be held in December to determine if Jack needed to modify his operations or relocate. Relocate, as if he could pack up a multi-generational farm and move it somewhere else. As if the land itself wasn't part of the operation, wasn't woven into decades of improvements and infrastructure and relationships with suppliers and veterinarians and feed merchants. Jack read the letter 3 times, then he called Gerald. "This is a Hail Mary," Gerald said. "Your operation has been here for decades. It was operating before residential zoning laws were established. You're grandfathered in. She doesn't have a case." "But there will be a hearing," Jack said, "which means more legal fees." "Yes. And even if we win, she can appeal." "Yes." Jack hung up without saying goodbye. He drove to town, to Turner's Feed and Grain, and bought a bottle of whiskey. He never drank whiskey. He'd seen what alcohol did to people, seen it destroy relationships, ruin lives. But he bought it anyway and went home and sat in his kitchen and drank it neat while staring at the legal documents spread across the table. The Bentley appeared in his driveway at 6 p.m. Jack wasn't expecting visitors. He hadn't even realized he was drunk until he stood up and the room tilted slightly. He steadied himself against the counter and went to the door. Karen stood on his porch in a black wool coat and boots, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders. She looked beautiful in the fading light, and Jack hated her for it. He hated that she was beautiful. He hated that she could afford to be beautiful. He hated everything about the way she existed in the world with such casual confidence. "I wanted to talk to you," Karen said. She wasn't wearing sunglasses anymore. Her eyes were a cool gray-blue, intelligent and merciless. Face to face, without lawyers. "Get off my property," Jack said. "Just listen for 2 minutes, that's all I'm asking." Jack's hand was still on the door frame. He was considering slamming the door, but something in Karen's voice made him pause. There was something underneath the coldness, some layer of complexity that he'd missed before. "You parked your car in my access way," Jack said. "I asked you to move it, you refused, that's where this started." "I know," Karen said, "and I'm here to tell you that I regret it." Jack blinked. This was not what he was expecting. "I've been thinking a lot about what I did," Karen continued, "and more importantly about why I did it, and I think I owe you an apology." "An apology?" Jack repeated flatly. "I know it doesn't undo anything. I know you've spent time and money and stress because of me." but I want you to know that I recognize what I did was wrong." Jack studied her face, looking for the trick, the con, the angle. People didn't apologize unless they wanted something. Why? "Because I'm not a good person," Karen said, and her voice cracked slightly. "I've spent the last 5 years being a very successful person, and I've discovered that those two things are not the same. My ex-husband left me for someone younger. I got a $3 million settlement and realized that money doesn't fix the part of you that's broken. So I've been trying to fix it by being right about everything, by winning, by being better than everyone around me." She paused, and Jack could see something in her face shift, something genuine breaking through. "When you asked me to move my car, I saw a man trying to tell me what to do," Karen said. "And I hated it because my entire life has been about men telling me what to do. My father, my husband, my boss. And when you stood there with your hand on my window, I wanted to prove that I was above that I couldn't be pushed around anymore. And I hurt you to prove it." Jack didn't speak. He was trying to process this turn of events, trying to figure out if this was genuine or just another form of manipulation. "I'm withdrawing the complaints," Karen said. "All of them. I've already called my lawyer. The zoning petition will be dismissed tomorrow. The environmental appeals, everything. I'm done." "Why?" Jack asked again. "Because my daughter called me," Karen said, and her eyes were wet now. "She lives in Boston. She called to tell me that she heard from someone that I was harassing a farmer. She told me that she was ashamed of me, that hearing that from her, after I've spent so much time being angry at the world, it made me realize what I've become." Jack saw in Karen's face something of himself: loneliness, damage, the particular kind of pain that comes from having lost something you didn't know how to value while you still had it. "I don't expect forgiveness," Karen said. "I just wanted you to know that I'm stopping." She turned to leave, and something in Jack, some part of him that had been twisted and hardened by rage over the past month, wanted to grab her arm, wanted to force her to understand the full measure of what she'd done to him, wanted to make her hurt the way he'd hurt. But he didn't. He watched her walk back to her Bentley, watched her drive away down the county road, and he stood there, alone on his porch, holding the door frame, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. The next morning, Jack called Gerald to confirm that the complaints had been withdrawn. They had, all of them. The zoning petition was dismissed, the environmental appeals were dropped, the noise complaints were canceled. It was over. Jack should have felt relief. Instead, he felt lost. The external enemy was gone, but the internal one remained. He'd spent the last month fueling himself on rage and righteousness. Now that the conflict had evaporated, he didn't know what to do with himself. He called his daughter. They hadn't spoken in 6 weeks. "Dad," Maya answered on the first ring. "Hi, I was thinking about calling you." "How did you know about the situation with the woman next door?" Jack asked. There was a pause. "I didn't specifically, but I called a few people in town last week because I was worried about you. You hadn't called in a while, and I wanted to make sure everything was okay. Janet Turner mentioned something about a neighbor causing problems. Why?" Jack explained the whole situation. The Bentley, the blocked access, the complaints, the harassment, and then the unexpected apology and the withdrawal of all complaints. "That's good though, right?" Maya said when he was finished. "It worked out. She apologized. It's over." "I know," Jack said, "but I'm not sure I believe it." "Why not?" "Because I don't trust good things anymore," Jack said. "I've learned that the world doesn't work that way. Bad things happen and you have to fight or accept them. But you don't get a clean resolution where the bad person realizes they were wrong and just stops." "Maybe this time you do," Maya said quietly. After they hung up, Jack sat in his kitchen and tried to process the fact that his daughter was right. Maybe this time he did get a clean resolution. Maybe Karen was genuinely repentant, and maybe her withdrawal of complaints was genuine. But the anger was still there. Months of fear and helplessness and violated boundaries and systemic injustice had calcified into something that didn't disappear just because the situation had changed. Jack went to his office, a small room off the barn where he kept his farm records, and sat in front of his computer. He pulled up Karen's social media profile. She had a public Instagram account filled with photos of her mansion renovation, her travels, her charitable donations. She lived a beautiful life, a pristine life, a life that had never known real struggle. And she'd nearly destroyed his. The apology felt hollow. It felt like a rich person who could afford to be generous with her remorse. She could withdraw the complaints and go back to her perfect life. Jack would spend years recovering from this. Years of elevated stress, elevated legal bills, elevated anxiety. She got to move on, Jack was stuck. He spent the next 3 weeks telling himself that he should accept the apology, should feel grateful that it was over, should move forward with his life. But he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd been violated and then offered a Band-Aid as compensation. The anger crystallized. It became less about what had happened and more about what it represented, a fundamental unfairness in the world that no apology could fix. On December 15th, Jack received an invitation. Corinne was hosting a neighbor's welcome dinner party at her mansion. She was inviting all the families within a mile radius. It was her way, the invitation stated, of making amends and starting fresh with the community. Jack read the invitation 3 times, then he threw it away. But he kept thinking about it. December arrived with a bitter wind and gray skies that matched Jack's mood. The farm continued its eternal rhythm. Animals to feed, water to manage, equipment to maintain. But Jack moved through it all mechanically, now autopilot made flesh. He didn't sleep better. The apology hadn't been a cure. It had been an anesthetic that wore off faster than it should have. Now he was awake constantly with his rage as company. Jack had never been a person who dwelled. His ex-wife, Margaret, used to say he was too practical to be philosophical, too busy to be bitter. But Margaret was dead, and the practical had curdled into rumination, and the busyness was now a desperate escape from thoughts he couldn't outrun. He'd drive to town for supplies and see Derek's Morrison construction truck at Corinne's mansion. He'd see the Bentley parked in different places around town, at restaurants, at the boutiques on Main Street, at the grocery store. She was everywhere, living her life as if she hadn't spent a month systematically attacking his livelihood. The withdrawal of complaints felt less like genuine remorse and more like she'd simply gotten bored. Moving on to the next project, the next renovation, the next conquest. The dinner party invitation still stuck in Jack's mind. The casual presumption of it, that she could do this to him and then host a neighbor's welcome event and somehow restore her reputation, smooth over the damage she'd caused. On December 20th, Jack went to the library and printed out every email, every legal document, every county record related to Corinne's complaints. He organized them chronologically, creating a timeline of her escalating harassment. Then he sat at his kitchen table and read through them again, drinking cold coffee, his hands shaking with renewed anger. His daughter called on December 22nd. "Dad, I'm coming home for Christmas. I'll arrive on the 24th. I'm staying through New Year's." This was unusual. Maya typically stayed in Boston for the holidays. She had a life there, a boyfriend, an accounting firm where she worked. Coming home meant abandoning all that for a week. "Why?" Jack asked. "Because I'm worried about you," Maya said directly. "You don't sound right. You sound like you're stuck. I want to see you. I want to help." Jack's first instinct was to push back, to tell her he was fine, to protect her from his dark spiral. But he was tired of pushing people away. He'd been doing it since Margaret died, and all it had accomplished was creating a larger distance between him and the people who loved him. "Okay," Jack said, "thank you." When Maya arrived on Christmas Eve, she looked like her mother. Same dark hair, same sharp intelligence in her eyes, same way of moving through space with purpose. Jack had missed her more than he'd allowed himself to admit. They sat by the fireplace after dinner, and Maya listened while Jack told her everything. Not the sanitized version he'd told her before, the full version. The way the powerlessness had eaten at him, the way the apology hadn't healed anything, the way he couldn't stop thinking about Corinne, about what she'd done, about the fundamental injustice of it all. "She apologized," Maya said. "She withdrew everything. Legally, this is over." "Legally," Jack said, "but not actually." "Dad, you can't control what happened. You can only control how you respond to it." Jack almost laughed. It was such a therapy-speak thing to say, such a perfectly reasonable response, and it was also completely useless. "I'm not looking to control anything," Jack said. "I'm looking for her to actually understand what she did, not understand it in some abstract way, but feel it. Understand what it's like to have someone destroy your peace of mind because you asked them to move their car." Maya was quiet for a long moment. Then, "That's not going to happen. People like Corinne don't experience consequences. That's the thing that makes them like Corinne in the first place." "Exactly," Jack said. "That's the whole problem." On December 26th, 3 days into Maya's visit, Jack woke up with something that felt like clarity. It wasn't a good clarity. It was the clarity of someone who's finally accepted something terrible, the way you accept a diagnosis you've known was coming. Karen would never truly suffer for what she'd done. The legal system wouldn't punish her. Social consequences wouldn't touch her. She'd withdrawn her complaints, given a hollow apology, and moved on with her life. By next month, she'd probably have forgotten about Jack entirely. He'd be a minor inconvenience in her past, a story she tells at dinner parties to illustrate how provincial rural people can be. But Jack would spend years, maybe the rest of his life, thinking about this, thinking about the unfairness of it, thinking about how someone with money and no conscience could destroy you with impunity. The only way to make it fair was to ensure that she felt some version of what he'd felt. He didn't share this clarity with Maya. He kept it inside, a dark seed growing in the soil of his rage. Maya stayed through New Year's, and during that time she tried to help. They took walks around the property. She helped him with the cattle. They cooked together old recipes that Margaret had taught them both. For moments at a time, Jack felt almost human again. But underneath it all, his plan was taking shape. Derek's Morrison construction truck was always at Karen's place now. The mansion renovation was in full swing, walls being taken down, new structures going up, heavy equipment everywhere. Jack drove past it occasionally and watched Derek supervising the work, watched the machinery move, watched the transformation of the old Morrison estate into Karen's personal palace. The farm gate needed to be widened. Jack had planned this for years. It would improve access significantly, make it easier for large deliveries. He could do the work himself. He had all the equipment. The machinery he had in mind was the same machinery he used for the most intensive farm work, the tractor with the bucket loader attachment. Old equipment, powerful equipment, equipment that could move earth. Equipment that could move a car. The fantasy had started small, just a thought experiment. What if he accidentally backed his tractor into Karen's Bentley? What if it was parked on the county road, which was technically public? What if he was working on widening his access gate, which was his legal right, and simply miscalculated? The fantasy grew more elaborate, more detailed, more real. Maya left on January 2nd. She hugged Jack tightly before getting in her car. "Promise me you'll do something about how you're feeling," she said. "Call Gerald, talk to someone, this can't just sit inside you." Jack promised. He meant it at the time. But the moment she drove away, he felt the darkness settle back in. For the next 2 weeks, Jack obsessed over the details. He studied the county road. He calculated angles and forces. He examined the Bentley's construction when Karen was in town, where the weakest points would be, how much force it would take to cause serious damage. He looked up Bentley repair costs, $40,000 for structural damage, $60,000 if the engine was affected, a complete total loss if the damage was severe enough. Then he looked up the monetary value of what Karen had put him through. His legal bills alone were $18,000. The lost delivery fee was $2,000. The mental health costs, the damage to his reputation, the lost sleep, the elevated stress that would probably shorten his life. If you could quantify those, the total would be staggering. $50,000 in damage to her car would barely cover what she'd done to him. He made a list, not a bucket list, a list of everything he needed to do to make this work. What day he'd do it, what time, what he'd wear, how he'd stage the scene so it looked accidental, how he'd respond to the sheriff's investigation. He had it all planned, every detail airtight. And then on January 17th, the moment came. It started as a normal day. Cold, clear, the kind of day that feels like it could be either winter or early spring. Jack did his morning routine, checking on the cattle, feeding them, breaking ice on the water troughs. The Bentley appeared on the county road at 10:47 a.m. Jack checked the clock. Karen wasn't working at the mansion today. No Morrison construction trucks in evidence. She was just parked there, probably on her phone, probably doing important things that required her to occupy space on public property without considering anyone else's needs. Jack went to the barn and started the tractor. The engine rumbled to life, diesel and power and terrible intention. He could feel his heartbeat in his hands. This was it, the point of no return. He maneuvered the tractor to the gate. In his mind, he'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. It would look like he was attempting to widen the gate, attempting to maneuver the bucket loader to remove a section of fence. It would look like the Bentley had been parked too close. It would look like an accident, simple negligence, unfortunate consequences of poor parking and imprecise maneuvering. No one would be able to prove otherwise. Jack backed the tractor toward the gate. The bucket loader was down, ready. Corinne's Bentley was parked maybe 15 feet from the gate boundary, her passenger side door facing the county road. Jack's hands were shaking on the steering wheel. He could still stop, could still back away from this, could still choose to be the kind of person who lets injustice stand instead of becoming an instrument of revenge. Corinne was still on her phone, not even looking at the tractor. Jack shifted the tractor into position. The Bentley's vulnerable flank was exposed. One forward motion and this would be over. Corinne would understand, finally, what it felt like to have someone take something from you without consequence. His foot hovered over the accelerator. Then his phone rang. The unexpected sound jolted him. Jack flinched so badly that his hand jerked on the steering wheel. He killed the engine and checked his phone. It was Gerald, his lawyer. "Jack, where are you?" Gerald's voice sounded urgent. "I'm home, why?" "I have news, important news. Can you come to my office?" Jack's mind was splitting. Part of him was still on the tractor, still about to commit an irreversible act. Part of him was trying to understand what news could be important enough to warrant a call at this exact moment. "Gerald, I'm in the middle of something." "This can't wait," Gerald said. "It's about the complaints, about Corinne Westbrook. Jack, you need to come in now." Something in Gerald's tone made Jack climb down from the tractor. His hands were still shaking, his adrenaline still coursing. He looked at the Bentley, at the gate, at the space between them where accident was about to become action. He started walking toward his truck. "I'm on my way," Jack said. In Part 4, Beat, the moment of potential justice denied. Jack is stopped from destroying Corinne's car at the literal moment of impact, forced to step back from the edge. The catalyst for change arrives literally seconds too late to prevent tragedy. Gerald's office was a small room above Miller's hardware store, accessible by a narrow staircase that smelled like old wood and dust. Gerald was a thin man in his 60s, perpetually disorganized, perpetually kind. Today he was excited in a way Jack had never seen before. "Sit down," Gerald said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "I have something I need to show you." He pulled out his laptop and turned it to face Jack. On the screen was an email sent to Gerald's office from an address Jack didn't recognize. "I received this morning from someone claiming to be Corinne Westbrook's ex-husband," Gerald said. "He read about the complaints she filed against you through some county legal filings that are public record. He wanted me to pass some information along to you." Gerald clicked to the next email, which was a forwarded message chain. The subject line read, "R.E. Corinne's pattern of behavior." Jack read through the exchange. The sender, a man named Richard Westbrook, was providing detailed documentation of Corinne's history, not with Jack, with others. He'd apparently done this before. The documentation went back 11 years. A property dispute with a neighbor in Connecticut where Corinne had filed 17 separate complaints, none of which held up but all of which cost the neighbor financially. A business dispute in New York where Corinne had engaged in what Richard called systematic harassment of a competitor. A divorce settlement negotiation that had involved threats, counter-threats, and an ultimately expensive legal battle. The pattern was clear. When Corinne didn't get her way, she weaponized the legal system. She filed complaints, real or exaggerated, until her opponent either surrendered or ran out of money. And because the system was designed to investigate every complaint individually, there was no mechanism to hold her accountable for the pattern itself. But Richard was providing something else. He was providing documentation of her conversations about Jack. Corinne had apparently discussed the situation with a friend over email, and Richard had forwarded those emails to Gerald. In them, Corinne described the blocked car incident exactly as it had happened, but she described her response differently. "He was so pathetic," Corinne had written. "Standing there with his little delivery truck, thinking he could intimidate me. I decided to teach him a lesson about who actually has power in this situation. I've got lawyers, I've got resources, I've got nothing but time. Let's see how long his little farm can survive against that." But then the tone shifted in later emails. Corinne had said that her daughter called her, and in the conversation with her daughter, she'd apparently learned that Jack was being supported by the local community, that the town considered him one of their own, and that Karen was being seen as the villain. It was humbling, Karen had written. I realized I was bullying a farmer because he asked me to move my car. I've become the kind of person I hate, so I withdrew everything. Richard's final email to Gerald was direct. I'm providing this documentation because I believe you should know that my ex-wife's pattern of harassment is a known issue for her. She did the same thing to me during our divorce. She will likely do it again to someone else if she faces no real consequences. I thought your client deserved to know the truth. Jack finished reading and looked up at Gerald. There's more, Gerald said. He pulled out a written statement from Richard, notarized, detailing Karen's history. He pulled out discovery documents from Richard's divorce proceedings that documented similar patterns of harassment. He pulled out affidavits from other people who'd experienced Karen's weaponization of the legal system. With this documentation, Gerald said carefully, you might have grounds for a counterclaim, harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, abuse of legal process. If you wanted to pursue it, I think you'd have a strong case. Jack felt something shift inside him. The moment he'd been standing on the precipice of, standing over the tractor, about to destroy Karen's car, suddenly felt very far away and very close at the same time. What would that accomplish? Jack asked. Legally, a judgment against her. Monetarily, you might recover your legal fees plus damages for emotional distress. Could be substantial, could be enough to make an impact on someone with her resources. Jack felt the anger in his chest respond to this. Finally, a path toward justice that didn't require him to become a criminal. Finally, a way to make Karen understand that actions had consequences. Do it, Jack said. Gerald's expression didn't change, but Jack saw his hand pause over his keyboard. Jack, before we go forward, I want to make sure you understand what this will entail. You'll need to testify. You'll need to relive this entire experience in a deposition, probably in front of her lawyers. It will be adversarial, it will be difficult, and it will take time, possibly a year or more. I don't care, Jack said. And even if you win, you might not feel better. Winning legal cases often doesn't heal the damage that prompted them. Jack thought about the tractor, about the bucket loader poised against the vulnerable flank of the Bentley, about the moment he'd stopped. I know, Jack said, but at least it's justice, not this personal destruction stuff, actual justice through the system. Gerald nodded slowly. Okay then, let me start drafting the complaint. The legal process moved faster than Jack expected. By the end of January, the counterclaim had been filed. Karen's lawyers immediately moved to have it dismissed, claiming insufficient basis for emotional distress claims and arguing that Karen had withdrawn her complaints, therefore no ongoing harm existed. But Gerald was prepared. He filed a motion in response that cited the pattern of behavior documented by Richard. He argued that Karen's withdrawal of the complaints didn't erase the months of harassment and the documented emotional and financial damage. He requested that the case move forward. In early February, Jack was deposed. He sat across a table from Karen's lead lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia who made it clear that her goal was to minimize her client's culpability. She asked Jack repeatedly about his emotional state. Did he have a history of depression? Had he sought mental health treatment? Wasn't farming a high-stress occupation in general, so how could he attribute his stress specifically to Karen's actions? She was painting a picture of Jack as someone predisposed to anxiety, someone who was exaggerating his response to normal community conflicts. Jack answered her questions directly, refusing to be baited, but he could see what was happening. The system that had protected Karen was now being deployed to protect her again. Even with clear documentation of harassment, even with a pattern of behavior, the strategy was to exhaust him, to create doubt, to make the case seem frivolous. But then, a week after Jack's deposition, something unexpected happened. Karen requested a meeting. Not with Gerald, with Jack directly. Jack's first instinct was to refuse, but something made him agree. Something wanted to see what Karen had to say now that she was facing actual legal consequences. They met in a neutral location, Turner's Feed and Grains parking lot in the afternoon with other people around. Karen showed up in the Bentley, and Jack felt the anger spike at the sight of the car. That car had started everything. That car and her refusal to move it. Karen emerged dressed in casual clothes, jeans, a sweater, her hair in a messy bun. She looked younger this way, more vulnerable. But Jack didn't trust vulnerability anymore. Vulnerability was a tool that people with resources could deploy at will. "Thank you for meeting me," Karen said. Jack didn't respond. "I wanted to explain myself, not as a legal defense. I'm not here because my lawyers told me to do this. I'm here because I need you to understand something." Karen's eyes were red. She'd been crying. "I got your deposition transcript from my lawyers. I read what you said, and I realized that I haven't actually understood what I did to you." "You understood perfectly well at the time," Jack said. "No, I didn't. I understood it intellectually, but I didn't feel it. I still don't fully feel it if I'm being honest. But the deposition transcript, hearing the details of how this affected you, how it changed you, how it made you question whether the system was even fair," Karen's voice cracked. "I realized that I wasn't just being cruel. I was revealing something about the world that I prefer not to know about myself." "Which is what?" "That I have the power to destroy people, that the system protects me specifically because I have money, and that I've been using that power without ever fully considering the human cost." Karen looked directly at Jack. "I want to settle this. I want to withdraw the counterclaim and offer you a substantial settlement. I want to do whatever needs to happen to make this right." Jack felt something in him want to reach for this, to accept the settlement, to move on, to be done with the conflict. But he also felt the ghost of the moment he'd stood on the tractor, felt the rage that was still coiled inside him, waiting. "Why now?" Jack asked. "You already apologized, you already withdrew the complaints. Why come back and offer money?" "Because I didn't want to face legal consequences," Karen said bluntly. "My first apology was about avoiding a lawsuit, I think, deep down. But now that there is a lawsuit, I'm realizing that I might actually lose. My lawyers seem to think the emotional distress claim is more viable than I initially believed, and I'm terrified of having to face a trial, terrified of everything coming out publicly, terrified of being revealed as someone who abuses the legal system." Jack heard the honesty in her voice, and he also heard the self-preservation. Karen wasn't here because she'd had a moral awakening. She was here because she was scared. "How much?" Jack asked. $200,000. The number landed like a physical blow. $200,000, more than Jack had earned in 5 years, more than enough to cover his legal bills and his stress and his trauma and still have something left over. "No," Jack said. Karen blinked. "What?" "I'm not settling. I want a trial. I want to make sure this is on record. I want everyone to know what you did, and I want a judge to say officially that you abused the legal system. Money doesn't fix that. Only accountability does." Karen's face shifted. The vulnerability disappeared. "Jack, I'm trying to help you here." "You're trying to make this go away," Jack said. "Same as you always do. Use your resources to solve the problem quickly. But this isn't a problem that money solves. This is a problem that justice solves, and the only way there's justice is if we go to trial." Jack turned and walked away. Behind him, he heard Karen call his name. He didn't turn around. That night, Jack sat in his kitchen and realized that something had changed inside him. The rage was still there, but it had transformed. It was no longer about destroying Karen. It was about being heard, about forcing the system to acknowledge that what she'd done was wrong. Legal justice wouldn't make him feel better. Gerald was right about that. But it would be official. It would be documented. It would mean something in a way that a private apology or a settlement or a withdrawal of complaints could never mean. In Part 5, Beat, the unexpected offer of settlement that Jack refuses. The realization that legal justice, not revenge, is what he needs. The shift from wanting to destroy Karen's car to wanting to destroy her reputation in court. The trial date was set for May 15th. That gave Jack 3 months to prepare. Gerald worked with him meticulously. They compiled timelines, gathered documentation, prepared testimony. Jack had to relive every moment of the harassment, every email from the county, every conversation with the sheriff, every sleepless night. But this time it felt like he was building something, a structure, a case, a story that would be heard in court. Karen's lawyers moved to have the case dismissed twice. Both times, the judge ruled that it could proceed. The emotional distress claim was unusual for a property dispute, but the documented pattern of harassment, combined with the impact on Jack's life, created sufficient basis for the case to go forward. In early April, Jack received a visitor. It was Richard Westbrook, Karen's ex-husband. He was in his 60s, gray-haired, with a kind face that bore the marks of past trauma. "I wanted to meet you before the trial," Richard said, sitting in Jack's kitchen. "I wanted you to know that what my ex-wife did to you, it's not unique. She's done this to several people, and every time she's either won or settled her way out of accountability." "Why are you helping me?" Jack asked. "Because I'm a coward," Richard said simply. "When she did this to me, I settled. I paid her money to go away. And then she did the same thing to other people. If I'd had the courage to fight back, to make her face consequences, maybe some of those other people wouldn't have had to go through what you're going through." Richard told Jack about the other people, a business partner in New York who'd had to close his company because of Corinne's false complaints, a property developer in Connecticut who'd given up rather than fight her legal onslaught, several colleagues who'd been subjected to similar harassment when they disagreed with her or challenged her authority. "She's counting on people like me, like us, to fold," Richard said, "to decide that peace is worth more than justice, and most of the time we do, but you're different. You're actually going to trial." "Because I have nothing left to lose," Jack said. "Because you're braver than I was," Richard corrected. The day before the trial, Jack couldn't sleep. He sat on his porch and watched the sun set over his farm, wondering if this decision was noble or foolish, wondering if fighting back actually accomplished anything, or if it was just perpetuating the cycle of conflict. But he thought about Maya, about her saying that people like Corinne don't experience consequences, about the fact that if he settled, nothing would change. Corinne would still weaponize the legal system. The next person she harassed might not be as fortunate, might not have a legal team or documentation of a pattern or a community that supported them. At 9 a.m. on May 15th, Jack sat at the plaintiff's table in the county courthouse. The room was small, not dramatic the way it appeared on television. The judge was an older man named Morrison, unrelated to the property Corinne had bought. He looked like he'd seen everything and had opinions about most of it. Gerald presented the case first. He walked through the timeline of complaints. He presented the documentation from Richard. He detailed the emotional impact through Jack's testimony. Jack spoke for 3 hours, answering questions from Gerald and then from Corinne's lawyer, Patricia. She was brutal in her cross-examination, suggesting that Jack had exaggerated his suffering, that he was predisposed to anxiety, that the complaints were routine community conflicts that he'd mishandled. But Jack stuck to the truth. He described the impact. He described the moment he'd stood on the tractor, poised to destroy Corinne's car. He described the rage that had consumed him. He described the way the violation of his boundaries had translated into a violation of his sense of justice. When he mentioned the tractor moment, the courtroom went silent. "You were prepared to damage her vehicle in retaliation," Patricia pounced. "Isn't that evidence that your emotional distress was severe enough to lead you toward illegal acts?" "Yes," Jack said. "That's exactly why I'm here, because what she did was severe enough to make me consider becoming a criminal. That's the cost of her harassment. That's what I'm trying to recover from." Corinne testified on the second day. She was polished, professional, contrite when necessary. She admitted to filing the complaints. She claimed they were based on legitimate concerns. She minimized the impact, suggesting that Jack was overstating his distress. "I apologized," Corinne said. "I withdrew the complaints. I've attempted to make amends. Continuing with this lawsuit is just prolonging the conflict." Gerald's cross-examination was elegant. He walked Corinne through her email conversations with Richard. He presented documentation of her similar behavior in Connecticut and New York. He asked her directly whether she'd intentionally filed false or exaggerated complaints. "I filed complaints that I believed were legitimate," Corinne said carefully. "Based on what evidence?" "Based on my observation." "Your observation from inside your car with the windows up." "I was concerned about the dust." "Were you concerned before or after I asked you to move your car from my gate?" Corinne didn't answer that. She didn't have to. The jury could see the timeline as clearly as everyone else could. The trial lasted 4 days. On the 5th day, the jury came back with a verdict. Guilty, intentional infliction of emotional distress through systematic abuse of legal process. The judge awarded damages of $85,000, plus Jack's legal fees, which totaled $32,000, plus interest. $117,000. Not as much as Corinne had offered to settle, but not insignificant either. More importantly, it was official. It was documented. It was on the record. Karen Westbrook had been found guilty in a court of law of systematically harassing Jack Sullivan. The judgment could be appealed, but it would always exist, always be part of her record. When the verdict was announced, Jack felt the weight finally lift, not completely. The damage had been done and no verdict could fully undo it. But there was a closure to this narrative now, an official ending. Karen left the courtroom without looking at Jack. Her lawyers immediately announced that she would appeal. Jack hadn't expected anything different. Walking out of the courthouse, Jack saw a small crowd gathered, local news, people from town who wanted to show their support. Janet Turner was there, the sheriff, several people from church. They'd come to see the verdict to witness accountability. That night, Jack sat in his kitchen with the court papers in front of him, reading his name over and over in the judgment. Sullivan v. Westbrook. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff. He called Maya. She screamed with joy. His lawyer, Gerald, had already sent congratulations. His insurance company had called to confirm that they'd cover part of the settlement. The practical problems of his life weren't solved. He still had a farm to run, animals to care for, ongoing work that never ended. But something fundamental had changed. He'd faced the system, and the system had validated him. His suffering had been recognized as real. 2 weeks after the verdict, Jack received a letter. It was from Karen, handwritten, delivered by a courier, not through her lawyers. Jack, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to believe that this is genuine. But I want you to know that the verdict has changed something in me. I spent my life believing that I could buy my way out of consequences, that if I had enough resources, I could bend reality to my will. You refused to let me do that. You forced me to face accountability in a way I've never had to before. I'm appealing the verdict, but I don't expect to win. My lawyers are suggesting that I settle the appeal rather than fight it further. I'm going to do that. I'm going to pay you the full amount plus interest. It won't fix anything, I know that, but it's something. I've been seeing a therapist, a real one, not a status symbol, and I'm starting to understand that the part of me that needed to destroy you when you asked me to move my car, that part of me is the same part that my daughter was ashamed of. The same part that my ex-husband couldn't love. The same part that is fundamentally broken. I'm not writing this for forgiveness. I'm writing this because you deserve to know that your refusal to accept injustice has changed something. Not just legally, personally, inside of me. I'm selling the Morrison property. I'm moving back to Boston, closer to my daughter. I'm starting over, trying to become a better version of myself. I know that's not a happy ending for you, that your life on that farm was disrupted in ways that an apology can't repair. But I want you to know that it's something. Karen. Jack read the letter 3 times, then he set it aside. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. The trial had said everything that needed to be said. By June, Karen had sold the mansion. The Morrison property went to a developer who was planning a luxury retreat center. It was a fitting end. The place where Karen had plotted her harassment became someone else's new beginning. Jack's life returned to a careful normalcy. The legal settlement was enough to cover his debts and invest in some new equipment. He didn't get rich off of it, but he got something better. He got back the sense that the universe operated according to a logic he could understand. In July, Maya came home for a week. They worked the farm together and she seemed lighter somehow. Her father was lighter. The dark spiral that had consumed him had been replaced by something more stable. Not happiness, exactly, but acceptance. A return to equilibrium. On the last night of her visit, they sat on the porch and watched the sunset. The farm glowed golden in the fading light. The barn, the fields, the machinery that Jack had almost used to commit an act he could never have come back from. I'm proud of you, Maya said, for not giving up, for not settling, for making her face what she did. Jack nodded. I was this close, he said, holding his fingers an inch apart. This close to destroying her car, to becoming a criminal, and I stopped. Why? I don't know, Jack said. Gerald called, it broke the moment, but I think I stopped because I realized that destroying her car wouldn't have fixed anything. It would have just made me someone like her, someone who uses power to hurt people. They sat in silence for a long moment. Do you feel better? Maya asked. Jack considered the question. Not better, but different. Like I was drowning and now I'm standing on solid ground again. The damage is still there, but I can see it clearly now instead of being submerged in it. "Will you see her again?" Maya asked. The farm flourished under Jack's steady attention. The new equipment that he'd eventually purchased with the settlement improved his operation. He hired 2 part-time workers, young farmers trying to get established. He mentored them, taught them his methods, helped them become better stewards of their own land. He didn't forget about Karen entirely. It was impossible to forget completely, but the rage had evolved into something manageable. Sometimes, on difficult days, he'd think about the moment on the tractor. He'd think about how close he'd come to destroying his own life in pursuit of destroying hers. He'd sent Karen a single response to her apology letter. It was brief. "I don't forgive you, but I understand that you're trying to be better. I hope you succeed, for your daughter's sake." He'd heard through the town grapevine that Karen was doing therapy, that she'd become involved in restorative justice work in Boston, that she was trying to make amends for patterns of behavior that went far beyond her treatment of Jack. He hoped it was true, not for Karen's sake, but because the world needed fewer people who weaponized their resources against those with less power. The lawsuit had changed Jack in ways he was still discovering. He was more cautious now about trusting people with privilege. He was more aware of how systems protected certain people while exposing others to devastation. He was more likely to stand up for himself, and he was better able to see injustice clearly. One autumn evening, Jack was working on the fence near the county road when a car slowed down. It was Derek from Morrison Construction. Derek pulled over and got out. "Hey, Jack," Derek said. "I heard you won the lawsuit against Westbrook." "Word travels," Jack said. "Yeah, it does. I also heard she sold the property, moved away." Derek looked uncomfortable. "I just want to say I was doing work for her and I saw how she treated you. I didn't speak up and I'm sorry about that. I was afraid of losing the job." Jack appreciated the honesty. "That's how she wins," Jack said, "by making everyone afraid." "Well, she doesn't anymore," Derek said. "Not around here anyway." After Derek drove away, Jack finished mending the fence. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. The farm was quiet around him, the animals settled, the work of the day complete. Jack thought about the story his life had become, a story about boundaries, about power, about the courage it takes to refuse to be destroyed and the wisdom to refuse destruction of others in return. He thought about the moment on the tractor, and he understood finally why he'd stopped. Not because Gerald called, though that had been the catalyst. He'd stopped because, in the moment of absolute power over Karen, in the moment when he could have destroyed her most prized possession, he'd realized that becoming her was a worse fate than what she'd already done to him.